According to the Death Penalty Information Center, the first established death penalty laws date as far back as the 18th century BC. In the 7th century BC Athens, the death penalty was the only punishment for all crimes. Under the reign of Henry VIII, it is estimated that over 72,000 people were executed during his reign. In the 1700s, in Britain, something as little as cutting down a tree could result in the death penalty. According to the Death Penalty Information Center again, Britain influenced America's use of the death penalty more than any other country. European settlers brought the use of capital punishment to the American new colonies. In this article, it also states that in 1612, Virginia colony governor Sir Thomas Dale ordered an act that would give the death penalty for such things such as stealing grapes or cutting down a tree. Nicole Daniels from the New York Times stated that the death penalty has been abolished in 22 states and 106 countries, yet it is still legal and practiced in the U.S. today. Jeffrey Jones states in the article, Americans now support life in prison over death, in that article, published by the Gallup.com, where he states that Americans' opinions of the death penalty has shown many shifts over the last 80 years, and it continues to evolve. And according to Gallup.com, a 1966 survey found that 42% of Americans favor and 47% oppose the death penalty. And this was the only time that there was more opposition than there was support for the death penalty. But a recent poll in 2019 states that 60% of participants believe in life imprisonment in prison is a better punishment than the death penalty. The Legal Information Institute published the 1805 code titled Murder, which states that whoever is guilty of murder in the first degree is punished by either death or imprisonment for life. Carly Costello in the Audacity Online, published in 2019, states that the use of capital punishment is a double standard. She states that you as a citizen are not allowed to commit a murder unless you are the government and you see fit. She states that if murder is considered such a terrible crime, then why does the U.S. government punish criminals and victimize criminals the same way that they victimize someone else? Carly also states that this eye for an eye mentality makes our justice system incredibly flawed. Amelia Herberty published an article in the Human Rights Careers in 2019, which states that the death penalty demonstrates cruel and inhumane punishment. She states that lethal injection has a high rate of error, despite being the most humane and common option. Injections can go wrong, and she states that injections can go wrong, and when they go wrong, it could take hours to kill the prisoner. And study shows that there are chemical burns that happen right after this takes place if these lethal injections go wrong. Herberty also states that the death penalty is intended for only murder, yet, however, in places around the world, governments use these executions for non-lethal or not so serious crimes. She states that many governments are not interested in justice, but rather control through the use of the death penalty. The death penalty gives authorities the ability to set standards on what is deemed appropriate and what punishment is deemed appropriate, considered up to them. This makes citizens fearful and violates their human rights. According to the Human Rights Center, the death penalty is not a good example of blind justice because studies show that the main people on death row are mentally ill people, people of color, and poor, and they make up the majority of people on death row. According to Mental Health America in Position Statement 54, in the U.S., between 5 to 10% of prisoners on death row have a severe mental illness. Herbert also states that despite making up only 13% of the population, black people make up over 40% of the people on death row. This shows patterns of discrimination against race. She goes on to state that the American South has the highest number of murder rates in the country and holds 81% of executions in the nation, yet states without the death penalty in play, the murder rate is the lowest. No studies show that capital punishment is a deterrent of crime. The U.S. has an incredibly flawed justice system, and the death penalty is too high of a punishment for such a mistaken system. According to an article published titled Wrongful Execution, published by the Texas Coalition, the information is given that in the U.S. the rate of error is extremely high. Since 1973, 159 people have been released from death row. Herbert also explains in the Human Rights Careers that new technologies like DNA testing have played a huge role in these fair trials. She states that if we dive deeper into these cases, we see that discrimination is at play, inadequate representation, and other issues that would not lead to a fair trial for these prisoners. Through research, a conclusion is found that the death penalty is too serious of an irreversible punishment of such a flawed justice system to use.